Millionaire marries a girl in a coma for grandfather's will. What happened next stunned everyone. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The gray sky hung heavy over the city, pressing low like a burden that refused to lift. At 29 years old, Adrian Carter stood at the edge of a sterile hospital corridor, his reflection caught in the glass of a vending machine. His tailored suit looked perfect, his shoes polished, his watch gleaming, but his jaw was tense and his eyes sharp with fatigue. Inside, beneath the wealth and polish, was a man about to make the strangest decision of his life. The rhythmic beep of a heart monitor echoed faintly from the private wing, drawing him forward. At the end of the hallway, a set of mahogany doors opened into his grandfather's suite. This was not just any man. Charles Carter, the patriarch of the Carter Empire, had built a fortune in steel and shipping, and now his will dictated the future of the entire family. Frail, pale, yet still commanding, the old man looked at Adrian with eyes that demanded obedience. "Adrian," the grandfather rasped, voice thin but unwavering, "you know what is at stake. Without marriage, without a wife by your side before your 30th birthday, the inheritance passes to Nathan. Do you understand?" Adrian exhaled, his lips pressed in a thin line. He knew. Nathan, his cousin, had been circling like a vulture, eager to take control of Carter Group. Adrian had no intention of handing over the company built on his grandfather's sweat. But marriage? To whom? He had no bride, no fiancé, not even a relationship to stage. The old man's trembling hand lifted, pointing to the hospital bed near the window. Adrian's gaze followed, and for a moment his composure cracked. A young woman lay motionless beneath crisp white sheets, a breathing tube secured to her lips, her chest rising and falling slowly with the aid of machines. "Elena," his grandfather said softly. "She was in the accident 6 months ago. No family has claimed her. She is here, abandoned, kept alive by our resources. She needs a name, a protector, and you need a wife. This is fate handing you an answer." Adrian's pulse quickened. His mind recoiled at the suggestion. Marry a woman in a coma? It sounded monstrous. Yet the lawyer standing by the door adjusted his glasses and stepped forward with a folder. "Mr. Carter," the lawyer began, "the clause in the will is explicit. The marriage must be legal, binding, and witnessed before the end of the quarter. Otherwise, all assets revert to Nathan. If you agree, the paperwork can be processed immediately." Adrian's hand clenched at his side. His life had been a series of negotiations, mergers, and contracts. He knew how to weigh profit against risk. But this was not business. This was a vow. He looked at Elena again. Her face was peaceful, almost delicate. Dark hair framed her pale skin. Beside her bed sat a sketchbook, worn at the edges, filled with drawings that hinted at a life once vibrant with dreams. For a long moment, Adrian stood still. His heart told him to refuse, but his mind, his sharp, calculating mind, saw no other path. Without this marriage, Carter Group would collapse into Nathan's hands, undoing decades of legacy. Without this marriage, Elena's care might be cut off, leaving her truly abandoned. "Fine," Adrian said at last, his voice low, almost bitter. "Prepare the documents." The lawyer opened the folder with swift efficiency. Papers rustled, pens clicked. Adrian's grandfather smiled faintly, relief softening the lines of his face. The hospital chapel was arranged that very evening. The priest recited vows in a hushed tone, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Adrian slid a ring onto Elena's still finger. His voice did not falter, though his chest felt hollow. "I do." There was no reply. Only the steady beep of the monitor, and the hush of the machines keeping her alive. When the ceremony ended, Adrian looked down at his new bride, a woman he had never spoken to, never touched except to place that ring. His jaw tightened. In the eyes of the law, and in the will of his grandfather, they were husband and wife. What Adrian did not know was that this union, born out of desperation and duty, would soon unravel secrets, awaken hidden truths, and lead him to a love he never believed possible. The rain fell steady that night as Adrian left the hospital chapel, the vows still echoing in his ears like a haunting refrain. The city lights outside blurred through the mist on the glass, casting long streaks of gold and silver. He pulled his coat tighter, not against the cold, but against the emptiness pressing in his chest. He had just bound his life to a woman who had not spoken a word, who had not opened her eyes, who did not even know his name. Back in his penthouse, Adrian poured a glass of whiskey and set it untouched on the table. He loosened his tie, staring at the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The world outside seemed to move with purpose, cars streaming, people hurrying home while he sat in silence, chained to a marriage that was supposed to save his company but already felt like a prison. He told himself it was only business. Protect the empire. Secure the legacy. That was all. The next morning, his assistant, Claire, entered his office with a raised brow. "You've been distracted since last night," she said, setting a file on his desk. "Is everything all right?" Adrian lifted his eyes from the screen. "I did what had to be done." Claire studied him carefully. "Rumors are already spreading. Reporters saw you leaving the hospital wing. They will ask questions." "Let them," Adrian said, his voice sharp. "They will believe whatever story we feed them." Still, when the office quieted and the weight of the day pressed down, his thoughts returned to the hospital room. He pictured Elena's face, still and pale, framed by dark hair against the white pillow. The image clung to him in meetings, during phone calls, even in the back seat of his car as he was driven through the city. That evening, he returned to her room. The lights hummed overhead, machines pulsed their steady rhythm. He stood by her bedside, staring at the sketchbook left on the nightstand. His hand hovered before he finally opened it. Page after page revealed drawings, city skylines, people in parks, children playing near fountains, and beams of light breaking through storm clouds. Each stroke carried life, passion, and a longing for beauty. It startled him. This girl was not just a patient. She was an artist, someone who had seen the world with wonder before fate had silenced her. "You had dreams," he murmured, his voice softer than he intended. "Dreams bigger than this bed." "Oh." For the first time, he pulled a chair closer and sat down. He read aloud from the newspaper he had tucked under his arm, not because she could answer, but because the silence had begun to feel unbearable. He told her about the market trends, about a competitor's scandal, about anything that came to mind. His voice filled the sterile room, and to his surprise, it steadied something inside him. Days slipped into a rhythm, meetings by day, hospital visits by night. He replaced the flowers when they wilted, adjusted the blanket when it slipped, and sometimes just sat in silence, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Each time, the sketchbook stayed near, as if reminding him that beneath the stillness lay a girl who had once filled pages with light. One late evening, as the city outside drowned in rain, Adrian leaned back in the chair beside her. His tie was loosened, his eyes weary. He pressed his thumb against the band of his wedding ring, feeling its weight. "I do not know why I am talking to you," he said quietly. "Maybe because you cannot answer. Maybe because for the first time in years, I can speak without someone wanting something in return." The monitor beeped steadily, indifferent. Yet in that hush, he thought he saw the faintest flicker at her fingertips, the slightest tremor. He leaned forward, heart thudding, staring at her hand. Then it was still again, and he let out a sharp breath. "Imagination," he muttered. But a strange hope had taken root, one he could not shake. When he finally left that night, he glanced back once more. Elena remained motionless, but something in the room felt different, alive. Almost as if the contract that had begun as a cage was slowly, imperceptibly, becoming a bond he could not escape. The following week unfolded under a relentless storm of speculation. Headlines appeared across business columns: Carter heir, secretly married, and who was the mystery woman in the hospital wing? Adrian's phone buzzed constantly, investors demanding answers, journalists pressing for statements. Nathan, his cousin, smiled too easily during board meetings, his words laced with venom. "You think this charade will hold?" Nathan sneered one afternoon, cornering Adrian outside the conference room. "Marrying a woman who cannot even speak? The board will eat you alive, and when they do, the company will be mine." Adrian did not flinch. He adjusted his cufflinks and replied coldly, "Do not mistake silence for weakness. What I do for Carter Group." What do you do, Nathan? Circle like a vulture. But the sting of truth lingered. Public opinion was a battlefield, and Adrian knew he needed more than a paper marriage to hold his ground. That evening, he returned to the hospital. Elena's room was dim, the steady hum of machines greeting him like old companions. He carried fresh lilies, their white petals glowing against the sterile walls. He replaced the wilted bouquet on her nightstand and sat once more at her side. "Tomorrow is the gala," he said, leaning back in the chair. "The first test. They will expect you there, Elena." His eyes flicked toward her still hands. A wife who exists only on paper will not satisfy them. They will want proof. Oh, the thought made his chest tighten. How could he parade a woman in a coma before the city's elite? Yet an idea had been planted earlier that day by Claire, his assistant. "There are ways," she had whispered. "If she can be moved safely, if the public sees her, even briefly, it might buy you time." Now, in the quiet of her room, Adrian struggled with the morality of it. But the truth pressed harder. Without a public appearance, Nathan would tear the empire apart. The next night, the gala hall glittered with chandeliers, the air filled with music and murmurs of the city's most powerful. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, and beneath it all hummed anticipation. Adrian arrived in a black tuxedo, his expression sharp, his posture unyielding. Beside him, Elena sat in a wheelchair, dressed in a simple but elegant gown, her hair brushed smooth by the nurses. A delicate scarf softened the presence of medical lines. To the crowd, she appeared fragile but present, a silent partner beside the city's most eligible billionaire. Whispers rippled instantly. "So it is true. She looks so young. Why have we never seen her before?" Nathan smirked from across the hall, expecting Adrian to falter. But Adrian held his ground. When the master of ceremonies announced his name, he rose to the podium. The spotlight washed over him, and for the first time, he abandoned the language of numbers and profit. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, "tonight is not about wealth. It is not about power. It is about commitment. My grandfather taught me that family is not only the people we choose, but the people we stand by when no one else will. This is my wife, Elena. She cannot speak tonight, but she does not need to. Her presence is enough." The room fell into a hush. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing the image of Adrian with his hand resting firmly on Elena's shoulder. In that moment, something unexpected stirred in him. It was not strategy, not duty. It was a flicker of pride, of protectiveness that surprised even him. Applause erupted, cautious at first, then stronger. Stock tickers the next morning would reflect the shift confidence in Carter Group climbing once more. But the price was heavier than Adrian anticipated. Back in the hospital that night, he sat again at Elena's side, his mask of control cracking. "I used you tonight," he admitted, his voice low, almost a confession. "I told myself it was for business, for survival. But when I spoke of you, when I stood there with my hand on yours, I meant it. I do not know why, but I did." He reached for the sketchbook again, tracing the edge of a page with his thumb. The drawings of light breaking through storm clouds seemed to mock him and comfort him all at once. He closed his eyes, exhaustion pressing heavy. Then barely perceptible her hand twitched. A single tremor, faint but real. Adrian's eyes flew open. He leaned forward, clutching her fingers gently. "Elena?" he whispered, heart racing. There was no answer, only the steady rhythm of the monitor, but he knew what he had seen. Hope, fragile and terrifying, had just entered his carefully constructed world. The following morning, Adrian arrived at the office with little sleep behind his eyes. The gala had been declared a triumph by the press, yet his thoughts were consumed by the faint tremor he had felt in Elena's hand. He replayed it endlessly, wondering if exhaustion had deceived him. By mid-morning, he could no longer focus on contracts or quarterly reports. He dismissed the meeting, grabbed his coat, and drove straight to the hospital. Inside Elena's room, the world was unchanged. The same white walls, the same steady pulse of the monitor, the same stillness. Yet to Adrian, everything was different. He pulled a chair close and sat beside her, his fingers brushing over hers. "Move again," he whispered. "Prove I am not imagining it." Silence answered, but he refused to let go. For the first time in years, the man who had built his life on certainty found himself clinging to hope. That evening, Claire visited with updates. "The press has shifted," she said. "Your speech made an impression. Investors are calmer. But Nathan is not finished. He is spreading rumors that your wife's condition is hopeless. He wants the board to believe this marriage is a fraud." Adrian's jaw tightened. "He will not win." Claire hesitated. "Adrian, did she move?" He looked at Elena's hand, then back at Claire. "Yes, I think she did." The assistant said nothing, but the flicker of surprise in her eyes told him she believed. Days turned into weeks. Adrian's visits lengthened. His conversations with Elena grew deeper, though always one-sided. He told her about his childhood, about losing his parents young, about the crushing weight of expectation. He admitted things he had never told anyone, that sometimes the wealth felt like a chain, that sometimes he wondered who he might have been without it. One night, the storm raged outside, rain hammering against the hospital windows. Adrian sat at her bedside, exhausted, his head bowed over the sketchbook he had been studying. "You wanted to paint light," he murmured. "You filled page after page with hope. I do not know if you can hear me, Elena, but you have done the same to me. For the first time, I want something more than money or legacy. I want you to open your eyes." The monitor continued its steady rhythm. Then, as lightning flashed across the window, her fingers twitched again. This time, Adrian was certain. He leapt to his feet, calling for the nurse. Dr. Harris arrived moments later, scanning the chart, his brows furrowing. "There is activity," he confirmed. "Small but measurable. We will run further tests." Adrian's chest tightened with a rush of triumph. For weeks, hope had been a fragile secret. Now it was real, written in the trembling of her hand, in the subtle change on the monitor. Later that night, when the staff had gone, Adrian sat once more in silence with her. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against the back of her hand. "Come back to me, Elena," he whispered. "Not because of a contract, not because of Carter Group, but because I am not the same without you." The vow echoed softly in the room, unrecorded, unheard except perhaps by the woman who had just begun to stir from her long silence. The days following Elena's first movements carried a weight of expectation. Adrian found himself checking the hospital room at every possible hour, his schedule bending around her recovery. Each twitch of her fingers, each subtle shift of her eyelids, became a victory that he clung to. "Doctor." Harris reviewed the scans with cautious optimism. "Her brain is responding. The activity is stronger than last month. There is still a long road ahead, but we may be looking at the beginning of an awakening." Adrian nodded, though his chest surged with emotions he could not name. Relief, hope, fear, it all collided as he stood by Elena's bed. He brushed her hair gently back from her forehead, his voice low. "You are fighting. I see it. I will fight with you." John. But outside the hospital walls, another battle brewed. Nathan intensified his campaign against Adrian. Whispers filled the boardroom, claims that Adrian was parading a fragile woman as a prop, that he had orchestrated the marriage to manipulate the will. Some executives began to waver. Stockholders demanded clarity. Claire warned him one evening as she walked into his office with a stack of reports. "Nathan has scheduled a press conference. He plans to expose the marriage as a sham and challenge the inheritance clause. He is going for blood, Adrian." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Then we prove him wrong. Elena is improving. I saw it with my own eyes." Claire hesitated. "But until she wakes fully, the world will not believe." That night, Adrian returned to the hospital later than usual. The city was drenched in rain, and thunder rolled in the distance. He entered Elena's room with weary steps, but found himself pausing as soon as he saw her. Her hand was resting differently than before, as if she had shifted slightly on her own. He sat down, leaning close. "Elena," he said quietly, "they think this marriage was just a trick. They think you are nothing more than a pawn, but they do not know you. They do not know the girl who filled this book with drawings of light. They do not know the person who has already changed me, even without speaking a word." For the first time, he thought he saw the faintest flutter beneath her eyelids. His breath caught, and he reached quickly for her hand. "That is it," he whispered. "Come back to me. Show them all that you are more than a name on a contract." The monitor beeped steadily, almost in rhythm with his words. He stayed like that for hours, his hand wrapped around hers, his heart pounding with fragile hope. By dawn, Adrian had not moved from his chair. His phone buzzed with urgent messages, board meetings, investor calls, Nathan's press event. But he ignored them all. His world had narrowed to the quiet rise and fall of Elena's chest, to the warmth of her skin beneath his palm. "Wake up," he said softly, "and I swear to you, I will never let anyone use you again, not even me." Unseen by him, her fingers curled ever so slightly, as if answering. It was not yet consciousness, but it was enough to make Adrian believe more fiercely than ever. He had entered this marriage as a cold transaction. Now, it had become the one vow of his life he desperately wanted to be real. The morning after, Adrian walked into the boardroom with a storm brewing inside him. Nathan was already there, leaning casually in his chair, a smug smile spread across his face. The executives filled the room with low murmurs until Nathan stood and raised his voice. "Gentlemen and ladies, we must face the truth. Our so-called leader has tied Carter Group to a corpse of a marriage. He married a girl in a coma, not out of love, not out of duty, but to manipulate our grandfather's will. This company deserves better." Gasps rippled through the room. Adrian remained silent for a moment, then placed both hands on the table and leaned forward. "You speak of truth, Nathan," Adrian said, his voice sharp. "But the truth is that you have been circling this company like a predator, waiting to tear it apart. Yes, I married Elena while she was unconscious, but I did not abandon her. I stand by her side every night, and while you spread poison, she is fighting to wake. When she does, this company will see who the fraud really island." The tension crackled like lightning. Some executives looked shaken, others skeptical. Nathan only smirked. "We will see. The press will not forgive this scandal. You will not survive it." Later that evening, Adrian returned to the hospital, his shoulders heavy with the weight of the day. Elena lay as she had before, yet something about her seemed different, more alive. He pulled the sketchbook onto his lap and traced the lines of one particular drawing, a beam of sunlight breaking through storm clouds over a quiet harbor. "You knew storms," he murmured. "You knew darkness, but you believed in light. Maybe that is why I keep coming back here, because you remind me that even in silence there can be hope." He reached for her hand, holding it gently. The room was quiet, only the hum of machines and the faint patter of rain against the glass. Then, suddenly, her eyelids fluttered. His breath caught. "Elena?" His voice trembled. Her lips parted slightly, no words forming, only a faint sound like a sigh. Her eyes opened a fraction, glazed but undeniably alive. Adrian stood frozen, heart racing, as the nurse rushed in at the sound of the monitor's shift. Dr. Harris followed moments later, his expression breaking into astonishment. "She is responding," the doctor confirmed. "This is no longer just reflex, she is coming back." Adrian felt his chest tighten with relief. He leaned down, his face close to hers. "It is all right, I am here. Take your time." Her gaze, faint and unfocused, drifted toward him. It lasted only seconds before her eyelids sank closed again. But the spark had been undeniable. When the medical team left, Adrian remained by her side, unable to move. His hand still clutched hers, his heart refusing to slow. "You came back to me?" he whispered. "Even if only for a moment, you came back." Oh, that night, as the city roared outside the hospital walls, Adrian Carter, once a man who believed in nothing but contracts and power, sat in a quiet room, his entire world shifting because of a girl who had not yet spoken a single word. And deep within him, he knew the battle with Nathan was no longer just about the company. It was about protecting her, the woman fate had placed in his care. The woman he was beginning to need more than air itself. Nathan did not waste time after news of Elena's first response leaked from the hospital. The next morning, tabloids blared headlines. "Miracle or manipulation? Carter heiress to be stirs after months." Reporters crowded the hospital entrance, demanding interviews, while investors called non-stop. For Adrian, the whispers of hope were both salvation and danger. Inside the boardroom, Nathan pounced. "How convenient," he sneered, pacing before the executives. The comatose bride suddenly twitches the very moment Adrian's leadership is under fire. "Are we supposed to believe this? It is staged, a trick. He will say anything to keep control." Several executives exchanged uneasy glances. Nathan slammed a folder onto the table. I have proof. The accident that put this girl in a coma was no accident. And who benefits most from her sudden marriage? Adrian does. The accusation hung heavy in the air. Adrian stood slowly, his expression carved from stone. Be careful, Nathan. Words like that can destroy you. Nathan leaned forward, eyes glinting with malice. Or they will destroy you. The truth will come out. Adrian left the meeting in silence, his chest tight with fury. That evening, back at the hospital, he pulled a chair beside Elena's bed. The sight of her steadied him. Her skin was less pale now, her breaths deeper, her presence stronger. I told them you are waking, he whispered, brushing his thumb across her knuckles. They laughed. They called it a trick. But I know. I saw your eyes open. I will hold on to that until the world believes. Dr. Harris entered with a chart. Her brain scans confirm it. There was external interference with her vehicle before the crash. Brake lines tampered. It was sabotage. Adrian's breath stilled. You are saying someone wanted her dead? The doctor nodded grimly. Yes. If she had not been found in time, she would not have survived. Whoever did this has not been found. A storm of realization swept through Adrian's mind. Nathan's ambition, the suspicious timing, the relentless attacks it all began to align into a picture too sinister to ignore. That night, Adrian ordered Claire to investigate every detail of the crash, every payment Nathan had made, every shadow he had left uncovered. Meanwhile, he returned to Elena's side, the sketchbook open across his lap. You were not just unlucky, he said softly to her. Someone tried to erase you. But they failed, and now I will not let them try again. For a long time he sat in silence, the hum of machines filling the room. Then, with a faint rustle, Elena's fingers moved again, curling weakly around his hand. Adrian's eyes widened. Elena, he breathed, leaning close. Her eyelids fluttered, her lips parting as if to form a word. No sound came, only a shallow breath, but it was enough to break something open in him. He pressed her hand to his lips. Do not give up. Do not let them win. You are stronger than they know. At that moment, Adrian understood that the marriage which had begun as a strategy had become a lifeline. Not just for the company, not just for legacy, but for him and for the woman who had already survived what others planned for her end. Adrian did not sleep the night after the revelation about the crash. He stood by the window of his penthouse, the city spread out beneath him, every light a reminder of the empire at risk. But it was no longer the company that kept him awake. It was the image of Elena's weak fingers curling around his hand, her half-open eyes fighting to stay in this world. She was no longer a silent witness to his desperation. She was a survivor, and he could not let her down. The following morning, he returned to the hospital carrying a folder. Inside were documents Claire had gathered. Bank transfers, security footage, and an email chain pointing to Nathan's involvement in the sabotage of Elena's car. The evidence was damning. Adrian sat beside her bed, opening the sketchbook first instead of the folder. I promised you light after the storm, he said, his voice firm but tender. So here at Island I will bring the truth to the surface. I will protect you, Elena. Not because of a contract, not because of my grandfather's will, but because somewhere along the way, you became the reason. I wake up every morning. Her eyelashes trembled faintly, as if in answer. Adrian leaned closer, his heart pounding. I want you to hear me. Even if you cannot respond, know this. I am with you. I will not run from this, and I will not let Nathan bury you again. That evening, the Carter Foundation hosted a charity exhibition. Instead of sending a press release, Adrian shocked the guests by unveiling a private collection of Elena's restored sketches. Each drawing, enlarged and framed, was bathed in warm light across the gallery walls. The crowd wandered in awe at the work of the unknown young artist. Adrian stood before them, his voice carrying across the hall. These works belong to Elena Carter, my wife. She has been silenced by tragedy, but her art speaks louder than words. Tonight, I honor her not as a symbol, not as a contract, but as the heart that has changed me. The audience erupted in applause. Investors who had doubted him days before now looked at him with new respect. Yet Adrian hardly noticed. His eyes were on the far corner of the gallery, where a live video stream from the hospital displayed Elena resting peacefully, her hand faintly twitching, as if reaching toward the light of her own exhibition. In that moment, Adrian knew it was no longer about appearances or strategy. It was about truth, about love that had grown in the quiet between them. And for the first time, he felt certain that when Elena finally opened her eyes, she would see not a stranger bound to her by paper, but a man who had already given her his heart. The storm finally broke on a quiet morning in spring. Adrian sat half asleep in the chair by Elena's bed, the sketchbook resting open on his lap. The steady beeping of the monitor had become part of his own heartbeat. He had lost count of the nights he had spent there, waiting, whispering, holding on to faith that she would return. Then it happened. A soft gasp, fragile but unmistakable. Adrian's eyes flew open. Elena's fingers tightened around his hand with real strength. Not the weak flutter he had seen before. Her eyelids parted, and for the first time, her gaze met his. Clear, searching, alive. Adrian. The word escaped her lips, faint but certain. His throat tightened. He leaned close, tears stinging his eyes. Yes, I am here. You came back to me. The days that followed were a blur of doctors, physical therapy, and headlines that stunned the world. Miracle Bride awakens. Crowds gathered outside the hospital. Reporters begged for interviews, but Adrian shielded her from it all. Nathan's schemes unraveled when Claire presented the evidence of sabotage to the authorities. Nathan was led away in handcuffs, his smirk finally broken, his name disgraced forever. Through it all, Adrian never left Elena's side. He helped her sit up for the first time, steadied her when she took her first steps, and read her words from the sketchbook when her voice trembled too much to speak. Every moment of progress felt like a vow renewed, not forged by law, but by devotion. Weeks later, when she was strong enough, Adrian brought her to the very gallery where her art had been displayed. Guests filled the hall once more, but this time it was Elena who stood beneath the light, her hand clasped in his. Her eyes glistened as she looked at her own work framed around the room, no longer silent, no longer forgotten. Adrian turned to her in front of everyone, his voice steady and full. Our story began as a contract, Elena, but it became the truth I never expected. I married you to save an empire. Now, I ask you to marry me again this time, with nothing to gain except your heart. The crowd held its breath. Elena's lips curved into the faintest smile, her voice soft but sure. Yes. Applause erupted, echoing against the gallery walls. Adrian slid a new ring onto her finger, not the cold band of duty, but a promise of love freely chosen. In that moment, Adrian Carter knew the truth. Wealth, legacy, and power could all fade, but the light Elena had brought into his world would remain. What had begun as a desperate contract had ended as the one vow that mattered most real, unbreakable, and forever.